Hello and welcome to Jazz Guitar Chord-melody, Part 64. Hi, this is Mike Hayes, and in this session we're going to use some very simple concepts to create beautiful chord-melody style guitar playing. The concepts I'll be presenting in this video are based on the major 6th diminished scale and the harmonization of that scale. If this is a new concept to you, don't forget to check out the first video in our chord-melody guitar series. Okay, let's get started. As we already know, when we harmonise the major 6th diminished scale, when we harmonise it in thirds, we end up producing only two chords. And for the examples in this video, I'll be working in the key of C major. So the two chords that are produced are C sixth and B diminished. We end up with various inversions of these chords, but they're the only two chords that are produced from the scale. Let's have a quick review and listen to these chords. I'll be playing the chords on the first four strings of the guitar, and you'll notice that the C6 chords are marked in red and the B diminished chords are marked in blue. You'll see why that's important when we move on to the next step. Here we go. Up to this point in our work, if we're working in the key of C, if the melody note was either C, E, G or A, we'd simply harmonise that with a C6 chord. Or if the notes were B, D, F or A flat, we'd use the B diminished chord. And that certainly works really well. And now the next step is to add additional colour and flexibility to our chord melody playing by using what is called borrowed notes. Now there's many different ways that you can do this. For today's project, I'm going to use the top note of each chord to show you where the borrowed notes are coming in. So with this next example, I'm starting with a C6 chord. The top note is G. For the next note, I'm going to borrow a note from the B diminished chord. I'm going to add in an A flat. And I'm going to use this A flat to connect me to the next C6 chord. Then onto the next bar, and we have the same C6 chord with the top note being an A. And now I'll use a borrowed note from the B diminished. This time it'll be the note B. And I'm going to use this B note, this borrowed note, to connect me to the next C6 chord. On to bar 3, and now we have the same C6 chord that we just played in bar 2. And you've probably got the idea now. I'm going to borrow a note from the B diminished chord. That's a B diminished chord that's nearby. And this time I'm going to use the note D. And we'll use this D note to connect us to the next C6 chord. Over to bar 4, and again we're going to use a borrowed note to connect one C6 chord to another. We're starting on the same C6 chord that we just played in bar 3, and I'm going to borrow an F note from a nearby diminished chord to connect to the next C6 chord. Okay, let's have a listen to how all this sounds. Next, we'll be using the same concept to connect one B diminished chord to another. We're starting with a B diminished chord with the top note being an A flat. Then I'm going to use a borrowed note from a nearby C6 chord. In this instance, I'll be using the note A to connect to the next B diminished chord. Over to bar 2, and beginning with the B diminished chord we just played in bar 1, I'm going to use a borrowed note from a nearby C6 chord, the note C, to connect to the next B diminished chord. And then over to bar 3, And once again, we're starting on the B diminished chord we just played in bar 2, and I'll be using a note from a nearby C6 chord, in this instance the note E, to connect to the next B diminished chord. Let's have a listen to that. The next step will be to look at ways that we can apply this borrowed note concept to our music. As a working model for this session, I'm going to use the first 8 bars of George Gershwin's I Got Rhythm. At the top of the screen at the moment, you'll see a basic set of chords for the first 8 bars of I Got Rhythm. And these chords are very similar to the original set of chords that George Gershwin used. And now at the bottom of the screen, you'll see another variation of these same 8 bars. Bars 5, 6, 7 and 8 are exactly the same in both versions. However, you'll notice in the bottom version I've simplified the chords in the first 4 bars. Let's compare both versions. If we have a look at bar 1 in the top version, we have a C chord for 2 beats, moving to A minor 7 for 2 beats. In the bottom version, in the first bar, I have 1 bar of C major. Now, if you think about it, that top version could have actually been C sixth for 2 beats, moving to A minor 7th. And in some versions of the song, that's how they've notated the chords. C6 for 2 beats, A minor 7 for 2. And for those of you that have been following the series, you'll know that a C6 chord contains exactly the same notes as an A minor 7th. It's simply a different inversion of the same chord. So what I'm doing there is stripping back all the ornamentation, all the movement. I'm just wanting to reveal what the basic set of chords could be for this song. If we have a look at bar 2 in the top version, we have a D minor 7 moving to a G7. And of course, this is a 2-5 progression, but really what's happening there is just creating some movement. We could just as well play a bar of G7th, which is what I've done in the bottom version. Having said that, here's another way we could think about the first 4 bars of I Got Rhythm. We could play C in the first bar, B diminished in the second bar, C in the third bar, B diminished in the fourth bar. The B diminished, of course, is functioning as a G7 flat 9. So it's another way of thinking about the vanilla changes. Next up, I'm going to create a chord melody arrangement using these first 4 bars of I Got Rhythm. And remember, I'm thinking about these 4 bars now as being a bar of C to a bar of B diminished, a bar of C, and a bar of B diminished. So I'm going to use this borrowing note principle to add colour to my basic chords. My melody in the first bar will be C, D, B. So under the C note, I'm going to play a C6th. I'll play just a single note for the D, and for the B note, I'm going to play a C chord under the B. Now I'm thinking of this B note as being a borrowed note from the B diminished chord. Now I know many of you will say, "Hey Mike, but that's a C major 7th chord." And of course it is, but I'm not thinking about it that way. I'm not worrying about chord names, I'm just thinking that this is a bar of C, and I can use notes from my C6 chord, but I can also use other notes that I can borrow from the B diminished chord to give me flavour. Let's have a listen to this first bar. My melody notes in bar 2 will be B, C, D, F, E. Keep in mind I'm thinking of this bar as a bar of B diminished. Under the B note I'm going to play a B diminished chord, then a single note for the C. I'm going to play a B diminished under the D note. And once again I'm going to play a B diminished chord under the F note. Now with the E note, I'm also going to play a B diminished chord under the E note. I'm thinking of that E note as being a borrowed note from the C sixth chord. I'm also playing a lower inversion of the B diminished chord. Let's have a listen. Let's have a listen to how the first two bars sound together. Now moving on to bar 3, my melody is D, E, C. I'm playing a C sixth chord under the D note. I'm thinking of that D note as a borrowed note from the B diminished. And then I'm playing a C sixth chord under the E, followed by another inversion of C sixth under the C melody note. Let's have a listen. Over to bar 4, where my melody notes are B, C, A flat. And remember, I'm thinking of this as a bar of B diminished. So I'm going to play a B diminished under the B note. I'll play a single note for the C, and then I'm going to play a B diminished chord under the A flat. Now what I've done here, I've done a little bit of trickery. I've taken this idea of borrowed notes a little bit further. So far in this session, all our borrowed notes have been on the first string. But what I've done here, I've used a borrowed note from a C sixth chord on the second string. If you have a close look, this B diminished chord should have a D note on the second string, but I've swapped that D note for an E from a nearby C sixth chord. And of course this creates a type of G13 flat 9 sound. But I'm really thinking of it as a B diminished with a borrowed note on the second string. And I did this just to create the type of chord flavour that I was hearing at the time. Let's have a listen. Time to have a listen to the first 4 bars to see how it's all shaping up. Here goes. Okay, that's the first 4 bars played as a solo guitar, but you remember those original chords in the I Got Rhythm chart. 2 beats on C, 2 beats on A minor 7, 2 beats on D minor 7, 2 beats on G7. I'm going to play the exact same chord melody solo for the first 4 bars, and I'm going to have the bass play the original set of chords, C, A minor, D minor, G7th, as a background for our chord melody solo. And I think you'll hear the effect is quite magical. You create all these interesting sounding chords that I wouldn't have thought of playing if I just used conventional theory. Here goes. Well, that's where we're going to leave things for today. We'll be following this line of thought in our next video. If you enjoyed this lesson and want to see more, please consider subscribing to my channel. It really helps me out and ensures you won't miss out on any future lessons. In the meantime, I wish you all the very best with your guitar playing, and I look forward to catching up with you again next time. Bye for now.